Hey guys, my name is Mark, and this is the Mark Method podcast. In this podcast, you can be sure that you can learn more about what you could be doing to improve your health, fitness, and strength. And in today's episode in particular, we're going to be discussing mental health, and we've got a special guest. Did you want to introduce yourself, Steve?
Certainly. Thanks for inviting me. It's the first thing I want to say, Mark. I'm really looking forward to this podcast. Thanks for that. Hello, my name is Steve Jones. I run a company called Genesis Therapy based in Kettering, and I work with clients on a one-to-one basis with their mental health issues.
You guys, the listeners, might notice that this podcast setup sounds a little bit better than normal, and that's because we're at Genesis Therapy, what would you call it, like your HQ?
My HQ, my podcast studio.
Yeah, it's a very nice setup. You got all top of the line kit, haven't you, and stuff like that. And like, ever seen that you're going to be possibly renting this out?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be part of the sort of business portfolio that I'll be carrying through in 2020.
Yeah, you got lots of things going on. Cool. So, you actually use this kind of like equipment in your therapy sessions, don't you?
Yeah, I do, but I don't use this equipment. I do use headphones and mics, but equipment that's been specifically designed for therapy work.
Yeah, awesome stuff, mate. So a little bit about myself then, and a little bit about my background with mental health is effectively from a young age I've kind of like had my own struggles and stuff like that, and effectively over the years of me going through my own like journey, I've kind of developed a bit of a soft spot for it, which is why I'm like in 2020 I wanted to make an active effort to kind of like just help promote people talking about it and stuff like that, kind of similar to what Steve was saying about not having a bad view on the term mental health. And as a professional, I don't technically help people with mental health, as I'm not qualified to. And yeah, I'll admit that certain things I definitely don't know enough about, which is another reason why I wanted Steve to come on here and kind of like help me talk about it. But yeah, I've heard many a time that I'm a great listener, so like sometimes that's all people need, just to start talking. And obviously one conversation leads to other steps to helping people with their nutrition, exercise, all that kind of stuff, and that's where I do come in. But yeah, so me from a young age, barely a teenager, I had quite dark and I would call it depressive thoughts, not to be confused with depression itself, as I never had an assessment, never was diagnosed, never taken any medication for it. I did do like an online quiz once, but yeah, you can never really trust those, can you, Steve?
Well, yes and no. The thing is, if you're trying out an online questionnaire, you're probably concerned that you may have an issue already. Now, there's no harm in filling them out, but for a proper diagnosis, seek professional help. Go see your GP, or pick up the phone and give me a call. It's free.
Great advice, mate. I was in this stage of my life where I was having like these dark thoughts and stuff, and whenever it happened, I'd often like seek distractions, which for me tend to be different like kind of hobbies. So it'd be like gaming. My guitar was like another popular one, and eventually I kind of stumbled across exercise. At the time of being in school, I was being bullied quite regularly. So I figured if I could get like something like a six pack, my bullies would like leave me alone, which unfortunately wasn't the case, but as well as getting me in shape and stuff, it actually helped me with my mental health. So long story short, what started off as like a bit of a distraction to kind of like help me cope a little bit better with my mental health turned into me helping get out of that sort of dark stage of my life and also building a career from it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, enough about me anyway. What are some of the common forms of mental health that you tend to help people with then, Steve?
Yeah, a whole variety of issues, really, Mark. Depression, most of the anxiety disorders. I've worked with clients suffering suicidal thoughts, clients who self-harm, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Fortunately, my training enables me to work with pretty much all mental health issues.
Yeah, very nice, mate. Very nice. So when we talk about mental health then, so it's not just about how someone's feeling, is it? Like there's all kinds of fancy things that kind of happen in the brain and the hormone levels and stuff like that. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yes, you're right, Mark. Studies have shown that certain hormonal deficiencies do affect mental health. I suppose one of the simplest examples I can give you, after childbirth, the drop in certain hormone levels is linked to what we call postpartum depression in new mothers. And that can last, I believe, and if I'm wrong, I apologise, but up to 6 months. We also have what we call neurotransmitters that play a significant part in the way we feel, and different ones do various jobs. Simple difference between the two is that hormones are delivered via the blood system and neurotransmitters via the nervous system. So for the neurotransmitters, it's sort of messaging between neurons.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it kind of depends on obviously what's going on with the individual, doesn't it? So
Absolutely.
yeah, dependent on what you have. So looking into some statistics for this podcast specifically, I was going over like different common mental health problems that people tend to have or struggle with and stuff. And apparently, depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia are the top 3 most common health problems. Kind of worldwide, and the fourth being bipolar, which I can definitely agree with. Like the people that I've kind of like interacted with myself, it's usually one of those, if not a couple of. Yeah, like would you say that like the common things that you tend to help?
Most of the people that come in to see me are suffering with depression or one of the anxiety disorders, of which there's many, even things like social anxiety.
Of course,
not being able to be out in crowds can be, for some people, really debilitating. And it's life altering for a lot of people. And when it's at that stage, it's a pretty severe condition.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, obviously, when people think of depression, anxiety, or like schizophrenia, pretty much any kind of like mental health, like, would you use the term problem or like disorder? Like, what? I never know what kind of like thing to say, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I do know where you're coming from. What I try and do, or what I try and use mental health issue or mental health concern. I suppose you've got to keep in mind that some people may not have had a formal diagnosis, so you don't want to be putting things into their mind as such. And also try and avoid using the words illness or problem, using less urgent sounding words. As I say, I don't want to cause them further alarm because they may not have had that diagnosis. And also try and help them avoid using statements that suggest that the issue is part of them. You know, when they say, I've always been like this, or I assume I'm always going to be like this, it's part of me, it's part of my nature, etc.
Yeah, because obviously, once again, dependent on what's going on, like a lot of people just kind of feel like that the thing that they have going on tends to be what's controlling their life. Like they put like the label that they are given on themselves, so it's I have depression and then I am that person that's depressed.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
and for a lot of people, Mark, is I am depression.
Yeah.
When I talk to people, they say, well, it's just the way I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is far from the truth. It's a behavioural pattern that they have at that moment in time, but not something they should really describe themselves as.
Yeah, because I can't remember who it was. There's a podcaster or person that's appeared on podcast called Mel Robbins, if you've ever heard of her.
Oh, yeah, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 now.
Yeah,
she's brilliant.
Yeah. So, like, one thing that I've heard her touch upon is it's not you are depressed, it's you have depressive, like, habits or consistency, that kind of thing, and, like, a lot of the cases anyway. But, yeah.
Yeah, there's some fantastic information out there. One of the people I refer my clients to, or one of the books I refer my clients to, is a book called Cavemen and Polar Bears. And it's by a guy called Andy Workman. And Andy was trained as a solution-focused hypnotherapist. And if you read this book, the humour in it is absolutely fantastic. This guy knows his stuff, and he makes it easy for people to understand. And I think when people begin to understand things, then it certainly helps. So yeah, Cavemen and Polar Bears, fantastic bit of reading. And Andy Workman, he's still doing what he does. He still has a therapy practice, but obviously he's an author as well. But well worth the read.
Okay, so we'll get into like the first main one then. So depression then. So it has many causes, but first of all, what is depression? So you've already kind of touched up on this a little bit already, haven't you?
Now, we all have moments when we feel down, but when you're depressed, the feelings of sadness last for weeks, months, and in some cases can last for years. I've had clients come in and see me and say, I've been suffering with depression for 20 years. Now, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, that's a bit cruel, but to trivialise depression and suggest it's not a real health issue is way off the mark. Anybody that comes up with that line, they're wrong. It is a real issue with real symptoms. And the symptoms can range from mild to severe. Now, you may feel persistently low in spirit, or at its most severe, this is worst case scenario, of course, and I don't want to alarm anybody, but at its most severe, depression can make you feel suicidal. Now, the great news, of course, with the right treatment and support, whether it's through your GP, a good therapist, most people do make a full recovery.
Cool, right. So depression then. So There were, like, I've done a little bit of, I say research, I use that term loosely. I've just kind of like looked into various stats and stuff that have been available on various different sites. And one of them being in 2016, an NHS survey shown 3.3 in every 100 people have depression in the UK. Now, obviously, like, depression is quite a common thing, and this is normally going through the process of effectively being diagnosed by either a GP or a therapist or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, I find it quite crazy because obviously depression being like a very common, what was it they called it again?
Mental health disorder.
Yeah, that's it. Like, yeah, it's one of the most common, but like I really struggled to find stats for it, which I found a bit shocking, to be fair, because if it's one of the most common, you'd think stats would be more available, but I don't know if that's just my poor looking into it, or...
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both, Mark, and I don't mean to be mean with that, but
that's absolutely fine.
there is, or there is a lot of data out there. Just following on your stats, just to give you a sort of more frightening figure of the numbers that, you know, can be affected by these things. In 2017, there were 792 million people worldwide suffering, and when you think 65 million people in the UK, and that figure was probably increased because, as I say, year on year, that was in 2017.
Yeah, it's getting bigger, isn't it?
And according to the stats, only 35% of people who are suffering are recorded as seeking help. So God knows how big the true number really is. In the UK, it's the same. You know, it used to be, when I first started, I think it was quoted as 1 in 8 people actually seek assistance for a mental health disorder. 1 in 8. So yeah, frightening statistics.
Yeah, and there's, as I say, like there are some people that with the suffering for so long, it then becomes normal, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, because I've had this for so long, that's just the way I live. And
yes, and to a large degree, you're right. I always talk to my clients about the learned behaviours, the patterns that we follow, and that our depression or whatever else we're suffering from, it's a pattern of behaviour. In essence, a habit, something that we do.
Yeah, so like the body as a whole, like movement, the mind, like it's constantly trying to find the most efficient ways to kind of do things. And obviously a lot of people just, because it becomes the norm, they don't seek extra help and stuff like that. And I obviously, with my intrinsic biomechanics, I work with loads of people that they've had loads of like little niggles here and there, and like obviously it's kind of more complex than just, oh, this is the problem because of this. It's normally like a collection of things, but yeah, obviously it's a lot of the time compensation, and it's no different when it comes to mental health, is it?
Absolutely. As I say, it's things we learn. You know, most of the processes we go through from a mental health, it's a learned behaviour. Mm-hmm. And we will have learned that, you know, people sort of say, oh yeah, you therapists always want to go back to, you know, when I was 5 years of age, somebody smacked me, so that's why I've got depression. Yeah. No, that isn't the case. But what we're trying to explain is that a lot of our behavioural patterns are learnt at a very early age. And if you look at depression and anxiety, most of the patterns of behaviour are formed, I think it's about 75%. I may be wrong, but it's a big number. Most of those patterns are formed before our early teens.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Where do we do most of our learning in our early teens? Mums, dads, aunties, uncles, friends, brothers, sisters.
Your environment.
Yeah, small groups. Yeah, your environment.
Cool, right. So the next point then, so we've got, what is anxiety? So you've already mentioned there's obviously different forms, and I apologise that I've kind of made it as like one generic term. But yeah, what kind of different forms of anxiety are there? Like,
okay. I just want to cover the difference between stress and anxiety first, if I can, because it's one of the questions, or it's a couple of the questions my clients frequently raise. You know, how do I know if I'm suffering with stress or anxiety, and is there a difference? And the simple explanation is as follows, and I'm going to be honest here, I wrote it down to ensure that I didn't mess it up. In short, stress is your body's reaction to some form of a trigger and is generally a short-term experience. Triggers such as, my tax bill is due, I've got exams coming up, my car has to go in for an MOT, and I have an important meeting coming up. And it can be a positive or a negative reaction to the stimulus. Stress is a natural response to a perceived threat in any situation. Anxiety, however, is a sustained mental health disorder triggered by an overload of stress, a persistence of stress. Anxiety doesn't fade into the distance once the threat is over. It will hang around for an extended period, and it can impair social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. I hope you don't mind me reading that, but I thought it too important to not give a clear explanation. I'm hoping that is clear enough for people. As for the types of anxiety disorders, well, the major types are GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, PTSD, panic disorders, social anxiety disorder, and a whole host of phobias, which there are far too many to mention. The most common form of anxiety in the UK is generalised anxiety disorder.
Cool. Right. So, so obviously stress, like we've already touched upon like the different types of stress and stuff, but like when someone refers to themselves as being stressed, because like a lot of the time people just have things going on and they're just kind of like, oh, I'm just stressed and stuff. Like when do you think it's more of like a bigger problem kind of thing? Like, so obviously we all have stresses in life, some good, some bad and all that kind of thing. But like, when do you think that it's, all right, now it's at a point where probably might need to get a bit of help or something like that? What's your opinion?
One of the most common symptoms of an anxiety disorder, I suppose, is excessive worrying. Other symptoms, restlessness, fatigue, poor concentration, being irritable all the time, feeling tense, avoiding social gatherings, irrational fears, being frightened of something that's, there's a meeting coming up and it's really worrying me. It's a little bit over the top, but hey, who am I to judge? For me, sleep issues, I think, are probably the best barometer of a sign that there may be some mental health issues. If you're not sleeping well, it usually leads to those other symptoms. If in doubt, use this as a barometer, as I say, and if you're not sleeping well, go see your GP. Typically what they would do, they would ask you to fill out, I think it's called a GAD-7 questionnaire. Basically, it's 7 questions with which they assess your level of anxiety. I think they take a reading every 2 weeks, something like that. But yeah, sleep for me is probably the best thing to measure. If you're sleeping in late and still feeling tired, if you're finding it difficult to get to sleep, waking up persistently during the course of the night, they would be signs that would suggest that things are not quite right. Go see your doctor. Nothing to worry about necessarily, but just go check with your doctor. It'll be down to you. Go see your doctor. Tell him how you're feeling. Tell him what your sleep's like. Tell him how you're feeling with the fear and that. Speak to a therapist, and you can get some great therapists in this area, of which I'm one, of course, that may give you some insight into some of the things that you can do to stop it getting any worse.
Yeah, so usually like the first step, if you are unsure, is literally just see what options you have available to you. A lot of the time there's a lot more help out there than what you actually realise. So yeah, a lot of the time it just takes a quick Google search really.
Totally agree with you, Mark. If you want to improve your fitness, you do something about it. You want to improve your mental health, again, do something about it. As you rightly said, there's plenty of assistance out there. So don't be frightened of it and don't feel as though it's a weakness. It's not a weakness.
Oh, 100%. And like you kind of get this kind of, I suppose, like more of a fear of like what you think people will then perceive you as.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
Once again, it becomes a label thing, doesn't it? And like me, myself, like in my personal experience, it was only, what would it be, about 2 years ago that I openly started talking about like what I used to go through. And it was only like once I was out of that phase, just because like I was so worried about how people would view me and stuff like that.
Of course,
as
though you've got a defect.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just kind of like now I look back on it and I'm just kind of like, oh, maybe I should have talked about it sooner, because then I would have been able to get help sooner. Obviously, I had like my own distractions that obviously all led to where I am today and stuff, which is never something that I would regret. But like getting help sooner might have actually helped a little bit sooner, and I might even got into exercise and stuff even sooner. But yeah,
a lot of ifs and buts. I'd not worry about anything like that. If you feel you need some help, put your hand up.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the first step to beating any of the mental health disorders.
So touching on some of the stress statistics that we kind of came across. So in the past year, which was 2018 on this stat specifically, 74% of people felt stressed, or felt so stressed, that they felt overwhelmed or unable to cope. And obviously we're always going to say the best thing that you can do is just admit that you need help and start seeking help and stuff. But most people think like, oh, I'll try and help myself in other ways, like have a bath, have some sort of like relaxation and stuff. And it does sound a bit wishy-washy in a sense, but it can actually help, can't it?
Oh, without any shadow of a doubt. When you're under stress, your mind and body begin to release hormones. Your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases also, and you start moving into what we call the fight-flight mode, and that's the stress response. Relaxation techniques help the body and the mind to relax and just lower that blood pressure and lower the heart rate. And there's lots of different ways to induce relaxation. Breathing techniques, mindfulness, yoga for some people, visualization exercises. Try different options and see which one suits you best. You can find lots of good advice online, but if you need support, you can also contact Mark or myself, and I'm sure either one of us would be glad to help you.
Next, I've got a silly question. Do you think exercise plays a strong role in helping people with mental health?
In short, yes. All of the science available, or the available science, I should say, will tell you your brain is a reward system, and that reward system comes to life when we exercise. Exercise stimulates the release of a whole bunch of neurotransmitters, endorphins, which you mentioned earlier, Mark, dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline, and all of these play a role in regulating your mood. I'm not talking about getting in the gym and having Mark beat you up for an hour. What I'm talking about is, I think it's 15 minutes per day of running or walking for 1 hour is known to reduce depression by 26%. Exercise also stimulates new brain cells, and it can help prevent age-related decline. What's not to like?
100%, and it's a very small...
small price to pay.
Yeah, small price to pay, that's it. Instead of then having to kind of have it build and build and build and then progressively get worse.
Absolutely. Just that little bit of exercise can make an enormous amount of difference.
Yeah, and obviously... Yeah, exercise definitely a benefit with mental health. However, one thing I've noticed is that different forms of exercise help with different kind of things that people have going on. So, like, if you are feeling worked up, if you feel like you need to let off some steam, sometimes something that has more exertion, so something that I've found quite common is lifting, boxing, something that lets that out sometimes can be quite helpful. But if you are someone that does feel quite, how can I describe it, quite, I don't know, you feel like the whole world is on top of you and you just kind of want to let it crush you kind of thing, sometimes something lighter, such as anything from, like, as you said, like a light walk to a bit of a brisk walk, maybe even a run. Personally, I don't understand people that enjoy running, but that's just my view on it. But yeah, like sometimes you'll find that there's certain forms of exercises that help more than others. So don't feel that there's one way to do things. Like, you could get beasted by a PT. You could go to a Pilates class, which, don't get me wrong, is still quite difficult, but then you can go for a nice light walk. You can even just go outside. Some people that are struggling that much might not even want to go outside, and going outside is a big step for them. So go out, get some fresh air, enjoy yourself, see what's around, try and study what's around you and stuff. Can really help.
Yeah, just breathe in naturally and just getting out and having that walk. Mm-hmm. I would say yes. Either way, something rather than nothing.
100%. And especially if you've got something going on where you feel like isolation is the best thing. One point that we've not touched upon is even just the social benefit of exercise. Can't tell you how many people come to the gym on a daily basis and you just have a conversation with people, like people you'd never met before and all that kind of stuff. Like even yourself, like you've been,
absolutely
part of social exercise.
Yeah, there was an experiment some time ago that proved the importance of the social interaction side of things. There was a rat put into a cage on their own. And they had 2 water bottles to choose from when they needed a drink. One of them was filled with water, plain water, and the other, I think, was laced with heroin. It could have been cocaine, something or other. The lone rat would drink from the drug-laced bottles until they overdosed and died. There was a Dr. Alexander in the 70s, I think, and he questioned the findings. So he put another experiment together, and he built what they called rat heaven, if you like. The rats had lots of space, things to do, other rats to interact with, play and socialise. And again, they were given access to 2 water bottles, one with clean water and the other laced with heroin. And when living in a social environment with things to keep their minds occupied, they preferred the clean water. I think some of them did drink from the heroin-laced water, but they didn't go back to it. None of the rats overdosed from the drug water. And that suggested the theory that it's the isolation that drove the addictive behaviour, whereas a social community almost, well, I suppose you could say, beat the power of drugs. And it's my belief that this proves the positivity of being in a social setting as well as lots of other people. Not only for exercise, but in all aspects of our lives. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like there's another podcast I kind of want to go over, and that's effectively just common fears that people have with the gym, and one of them being don't know anyone, I'm afraid people will look at me, and usually getting into the gym environment, you realise people are only really looking at you because you're looking at them to see if they're looking at you. And when you get to know people that go to the gym, we are, as a whole, usually quite a friendly bunch. So you spark a conversation with someone, and a lot of the time they are more than happy to help you. Or at least the gyms that I've trained at. Like, I've trained at quite a lot of gyms, not only in Kettering, but just Northamptonshire as a whole, even ventured out. And a lot of the time, if you spark a conversation with someone, they will help you. Like, and obviously from that initial conversation of them helping you, how are you getting on? And then it turns into all kinds of other things. And yeah, I mean, I've been at Balanced Health Clubs now for getting on for almost 8 years now. And I've made so many friends from it. And yeah, there's definitely benefits to the social side. And if you feel like you don't have anyone around you currently, a gym is the best place, because you've got people that are all sharing the same goal of just trying to better themselves in various different ways. And although the gym itself is mainly an exercise or a physical exertion, that does come with a lot of mental health benefits. So yeah, definitely worth getting yourself to a gym if you're not there. And if not, if you would prefer to exercise on your own, that's fine too.
Yeah. Well, the key thing is, and I think most people miss the trick, if you're talking about a good gym, of which Balance is without any shadow of a doubt, is contact the gym, tell them how you feel.
Yeah.
Is there any way that, can they direct you to very quiet times?
Yep.
Where you may not feel so under pressure? Is there any way, do they do any kind of sort of assistance for people new to a gym? Is there a PT on hand that'll just take them through the motions, just teach them a bit? And I know Balance, you actually have the induction, don't you, where you teach people?
Yeah, so like we have it where I'm pretty sure the health check, so making sure that you're all health and safety side of things, you're good to go when it comes to exercise and stuff is all cleared. You have the option of an induction, and that's usually taking you through the basics, make sure that you know what you're doing and you're comfortable doing it. And I'm pretty sure at Balance, at least, like they do offer free reviews as well. So if you get a bit complacent doing the same thing over the time, you can do that. Or obviously you can then venture down the personal training route and stuff. But one of the main things is if you speak to any person that's worked in a gym for quite a lengthy period of time, is you'll feel the passion behind it. And I think that, like, in my personal opinion, is so infectious. I love doing what I'm doing. And if you mention a barbell to me, I change. I love anything to do with barbell training, and it's why I'm so like sort of into doing powerlifting and getting people powerlifting and stuff like that. I love it. So like already you'll probably notice my voice has changed because I started talking about it. So having someone with passion talk to you about their passion can also be very empowering and kind of get you into it.
Absolutely. It's a bit of encouragement, simple bit of encouragement, but don't be frightened to take the first step. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Do a bit
100%.
of exercise, walk outside, just get yourself motivated and see where it leads you. You don't all have to be in a gym to be fit. You can do certain things yourself that'll just, and it doesn't matter what age you are either. I'm 63, and about 18 months ago, I decided to try and run 5K every day for a year without a break. I actually didn't achieve that, but I got 186 days. So I was 62 when I finished that exercise.
Bloody hell, that's really good though.
Again, it can be done. And I see some of the older guys that come in here, older than me, and that's saying something, but they come into the gym and they do some fantastic things. People of all different shapes, sizes. It's just brilliant to see. And you see some really big guys that come in here, and maybe they're not, going to be pumping iron, but they thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah. And it's a great atmosphere. It really is. I can't say enough about the gym. That's why I'm a member here. I love it. Yeah. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I love it too. So getting on to an outside the gym sort of focus. So nutrition. So my personal take on nutrition is if you feel better, and often you feel better by eating healthier food and stuff, you feel better mentally. Would you care to touch upon nutrition?
Of course. There's a whole host of studies that have shown a direct connection between your food choices and your overall health. I think it's been known for quite a time that eating a nutritious diet helps you keep that healthy body, healthy heart, and reduces the risk of developing some chronic diseases. But there's a whole new bunch of research. The conclusion there is your food choices also affect your mood and your mental health. I think the catchy name that they're using for it is the food-mood connection, I believe it's called. You can exercise mad and you can eat really poorly, and all you end up doing is just doing more exercise to try and burn off all the rubbish calories you've just eaten. Well, what's the sense in that? Certainly, I used to train like that, I'll be honest, because I like my beer. And it's as simple as that. And what I used to do, I got into calorie counting. And of course, then you start learning the calories that are in a pint of lager. And then you think, right, well, if I have a pint of lager, if I train for an extra hour, I can get rid of that. So I was training harder and harder just so I could drink more and more. Well, how stupid can you be? And then I'd have to train more and more. But I was loving me beer.
Yeah, because obviously we're going to get into eating disorders and stuff like that shortly. But when it comes to nutrition and your mental health, a lot of the time people see eating healthy as boring. And typically, like if I said to Joe Blogs down the gym, what's eating healthy? I hear it all the time, chicken, rice, broccoli. And it even just hearing it sounds boring. But sometimes you can bring some more excitement to it. So if I said, all right, we're going to be making brownies that are high in protein, low in sugar, and low calorie, suddenly it changes the game. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to promote a brownie diet coming down here, but like it's kind of like you can still have things that you would normally have, but sometimes there are better options. And I call it normally the healthier switch. So it's kind of like if you're in a scenario where you can have something like, I don't know, iced cake or something like that, or you can have a high protein, low calorie brownie, most people would go, I'd prefer the iced cake, but the brownie's still a good choice. It's just a better choice. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, often if you're going to have something like a burger, right? Have the burger without the bun, suddenly you've removed a load of calories, so it's a better choice. Do you know what I mean?
Again, you've hit upon it. It's choice.
Yeah.
If you want to eat unhealthy and you choose to do so, you'll suffer the consequences in terms of not only physical health, but in terms of mental health as well.
Mm-hmm.
Everything Mark's talking about is a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just recognising which. And does it mean that, you can't do this? Yeah, of course you can treat yourself once in a while. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, as a personal trainer, like the biggest reason why I think certain diets don't work for people or they fail or people like stop the diet and then go completely opposite the other way is because they're being unrealistic in their expectation. So they think the chicken, the rice, broccoli, that's the only way I can get to where I need to be. And they don't allow themselves to live a normal life. And like it can affect the social aspect of things. And it's, I don't want to go to this meal out because there's no healthy options, or I'll have to have salad and I refuse to pay £10 for a salad. And it's kind of like, well, no, you can go out, you can treat yourself, you just make small adjustments elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Or if it's just one meal, have it, enjoy yourself, move on. Accept that it's happened, it's fine. And a lot of the time, people don't necessarily need to rush as much as what they're let on. Like, typically, if you think about most people, they tend to have, like, 1, if you're lucky, 2 holidays a year, something like that. And most people like to get holiday ready, or at least summer ready. And you have the rest of the year to focus on that. Or most people have a year to focus on it. And obviously you do have obstacles within that, being Christmas, birthdays, other social events, that kind of thing. And it's all about just adjusting little and little, just as you go, and enjoying yourself as well at the same time. All right, so next point then. So when we talk about exercise and mental health disorders, there's also the opposite end of the spectrum where you've got body dysmorphia, which is effectively what would you call it? The obsession of your appearance, or you seeing yourself very differently to how you actually are. Did you want to touch upon that?
Yeah, I've not come across too many cases, but I dealt with a young lady that had anorexia, mm-hmm. and that was an awful thing to witness, and very difficult for the person concerned.
Yeah, 100%. Like the human body does have its similarities, but you've also got these differences that each and every human body has, such as something like fingerprints. And effectively, when it comes to people's view on how your body should look and stuff, most of the time, or at least in my experience I've found, is people focus on things that aren't necessarily in their control, which then, I suppose, leading back to stress, anxiety, depression, it's out of their control. Thus, they then develop more of a focus on it. And if you're focusing on how your fingerprint looks, then obviously that's going to then build on it. And sometimes I don't necessarily like the word acceptance, but effectively, if you can't change something about yourself, then effectively, like, is there much point in focusing on it, like, kind of thing? Like, and
it's like anything. I always say to a little mantra that I stole from a guy I was following on social media at one point, and it's, have I got a problem in life? No. Then why worry? Have I got a problem in life? Yes. Can you do something about it? No. Then why worry?
Yeah.
Have I got a problem in life? Yes. Can you do something about it? Yes. Then why worry?
See, one of my favorite sayings is change expectation for appreciation. And if you do that, like, your whole view about everything changes. And once again, it's back to that optimistic mindset. And I've been in my own training, I've been injured, and I've been beaten up, and I've been restricted in what I can do. And I just appreciate these days the ability to move how I do, to do something that I love, to show people like something that I love and stuff like that. So a lot of the time, if you change your view on what you appreciate about yourself, like, a lot of the time that can then start building more of a positive habit about yourself. And if you feel like there's nothing that you can see about yourself that you don't find positive, I would personally say you're at that point where maybe you need to see someone about it. You need to get some help, because there's always positives to people, and hate to be that optimist to say it, but could always be worse. Right, so the next point then, so social media. This one's going to be a tough one. So the expectation of the fitness industry. I don't know if you know much about, like, what the expectation in the fitness industry is, especially when it comes to social media.
Well, looking at the shape of my body, Mark, honestly, could you turn and let me just put that into perspective? We're fully clothed, but can you really sort of look at me and think, yeah, that guy knows about the expectations of the fitness industry? Yeah,
well, effectively, like, especially when it comes to social media, the expectation of the fitness industry, like, to put it in a very, very common or generic kind of like term, it's usually women must have big bums, smooth legs, and not too broad of shoulders. And then you've got the men must have abs, big arms, big chest, big back, and the legs, we won't touch upon that because not many people tend to. But yeah, you have this expectation of the fitness industry, and sometimes when you think you're innocently scrolling through various, like, social media platforms, Instagram, I think, is, like, typically the worst, because there's no sort of, like, monitoring of it, and you have people that tend to Photoshop images these days and stuff. Sometimes it can change what you think your expectation should be, and that can sometimes be a bad thing. So what I would say with that is, with the social media thing, is, like, I personally usually recommend, when it comes to the fitness industry, follow people that help, that, like, effectively help you not only, like, view certain things, but also, are they actually giving you value, or are you just looking at these pictures of them barely clothed and then thinking, no, I feel quite shit about myself? Like, do you follow anyone on Instagram or anything?
No, I hate it. I hate all of the social media platforms. Do I use them? Yes, I am on that bandwagon. I don't use them much.
It's now vital in business, isn't it? Like, or it seems like it's a lot more vital when it comes to business sense. So
if you look on any platform, they will tell you it's vital for business.
Yeah.
I don't get any business through social media, but then I don't interact a lot with social media.
Yeah,
some people it works for. Some people are a bit, old fossil like myself. We're a bit anti it, but I just are on social media. My nieces, nephews, and that are on social media, and I see some of the pictures of them, and they've got these smooth skin. Even I use something called Zoom, which is like Skype.
Oh, okay.
And I interact with clients sometimes online, and so I set it up, and I've got a nice camera on top. But this camera automatically smooths my face out,
and it's weird, isn't it?
And
when you see it, and you're not expecting it. You're like, I don't look like that.
I'm looking at that picture that I can see of me, and I'm thinking, my God, do I look that good? And then I go in the mirror outside
Yeah.
for a loo, and I look in the mirror and I think, no, you don't. It's this false impression, because when you meet people face to face, which is how we should be meeting people, not on
100%.
social bloody media.
Yep.
We should be meeting people. That's what we're designed to do, and that gives us the most satisfaction. But generally speaking, I think it's a bit of a blight on people now. I think it's a little bit too intrusive.
Yeah, like once again, it's another plan of mine on the podcast is to go on to the benefits and the negatives to social media, because I do think that there are some benefits if approached in the right way. And my business personally, I've managed to get
lots of people make good use of it. Don't get me
100%.
wrong.
Oh no, I fully get that. But then also there is that negative side of it, and to be fair, not even just social media. Like, have you been on the Balance website recently, Steve?
No.
All right. So if you head on there, first thing you see is myself beardless. And it is the weirdest thing. And you then obviously you look at photos of me now and I've got this beard, but like seeing yourself when you're not, like in a way that you're not used to seeing, once again, it becomes your perception of yourself. And
absolutely.
Yeah, like me without a beard, oh my God, it's just so strange seeing me like this. And then if I applied any kind of like, what they call that, like beauty filters and stuff, it changes me even more and it's even weirder. So you got to think that typically if people are altering photos, or even if it doesn't even look like they are, don't necessarily see it as what would you call it? Face value? Is that right? Yeah. So like, yeah, you want to find people that help you, or to be fair, go to a gym, meet people in person.
Yeah. Just last couple of things I want to say about social media. It's about the addictive qualities of it. It causes a release of, and I've mentioned neurotransmitters before. This particular one, dopamine. So if we go back a few thousand years to the caveman era, when we lived in small groups, our brains started to develop what we call a pack mentality. Safety in numbers, more chance of not being eaten by a lion if we were included in the pack. So our brains developed a reward, if you like, to make sure that we always strived to be part of a group. And when we were accepted in the pack, the brain rewarded us by releasing dopamine to make us feel great. You know, think about it. How excited do you get when a post receives lots of likes?
Yeah.
It's like the modern day pack approval.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, it's got to be said, like, because I do a lot of my business through my phone, it's a lot, like, I'm definitely on my phone a lot more than what I used to be. And it's part of, I would say, the downside. But, like, I've started recently working pen and paper. Like that automation.
Oh my God, what's that?
I know. So like if I'm ever like making notes and stuff, notepad comes out, get my pen out and I'll start making notes. And the other day I was doing it in the gym and someone said, "What are you doing? Like what you writing about?" And I was like, "Just doing a to-do list." And they were like, "Can you not do that on your phone?" And I was like, "But you can do it on pen and paper too."
Journaling is something that's used within a lot of therapy work.
Yes.
And it's been proven to be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and to touch upon that as well, when it comes to journaling and stuff like that, it's very, common with business people. Typically, what they tend to do is they'll write out a to-do list at the start of the day. They'll usually at the end of the day write out things that they've got done or things that they're grateful for and stuff like that to effectively build on that positive mindset.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Again, there's a lot in this journaling, but to be quite honest, they talk, get up at 4:30 in the morning and start writing your journal for the day. To-do lists, I'm not a fan of to-do lists. My to-do list will have one thing on it.
Okay.
And then when that's done, I'll write another to-do list, one thing on it. Write a to-do list as many times as you want. I'll guarantee you won't achieve hardly any of them. And you'll just add them to tomorrow. It's just signalling failure all the time.
Okay.
Write one on. When you've done it, complete it.
Yep.
Scribe a line through it. Write the next one. See success.
Yeah.
Stop seeing failure by having a list that you don't achieve.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No,
Yeah,
100%.
that's what I teach my people. My people. My people. My clients.
Yeah. Like, when it comes to my to-do list personally, like there have been a few times where if I've got like 3 or 4 things on there, usually like if I block out a bit of time, just focus on it, perfect. But yeah, there might be the occasional day where I'm like, oh, I've got 8 things on here. And then that alone becomes quite overwhelming, becomes quite stressful.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I fully agree with you on that one. Cool. Right, so eating disorders then. So obviously we've already kind of touched upon this already. So apparently the most common eating disorders tend to be anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. So you've said that you've worked with people with...
Yeah, only the one client, I'll be honest. But yeah, as I said earlier, Mark, it's not something that I can lay claim to having a lot of success at. I've only really had the one client with an eating disorder. I do have the occasional client wanting help with weight management, though. And to be honest, I wouldn't turn a client away who was suffering with any kind of eating disorder, as I've been trained to support those with those kind of problems. But I do firmly believe that with the guidance of a good therapist, a lot of people can be helped to regain control in their life, which is probably the thing that they don't feel they have at the moment. So good therapy can help.
With myself, I don't necessarily deal with people with eating disorders specifically, but I have clients that have had or have eating disorders. And the majority of the time, going back to the points that we kind of already mentioned, with habits, it's they'll experience a stressful situation. The habit is stress, food, or no food. And then it's developing the habit within that, if that makes sense. So then that becomes the norm. So whenever they experience stress, they either have a binge eating or they do the opposite and don't eat for ages.
And it'll be carbs that we go to.
Yeah, usually. Yeah, because they're the main, the dopamine releaser.
Well, this is where, it helps in the replenishment of the sugars and this kind of thing into the body. So, we'll go for the carbs.
Yeah. So, yeah, when it comes to eating disorders then, would you say that sometimes rather than all the time, it tends to be usually... I'm trying to tiptoe around my words too much. It can be caused by stress as like a majority, or like some other mental health disorder, would you say? Or I suppose it's case by case.
It's very difficult to sort of pigeonhole everything into the right area, but typically the people that do come to see me that have got, I would say they're a little bit overweight or whatever, and they want to lose a few pounds, and I dig a little bit deeper and I treat them for stress.
Yeah.
I treat them for anxiety. I treat them for depression. And during the course of that process, I'll give you an example of his names, but I had a young woman that came in to me, and clearly she was overweight. She was unhappy about it.
Yep.
And she came in, she said to me, I'm here for weight management, blah, blah, blah. And we had probably about a half an hour chat before she actually started telling me what was wrong in her life.
Yeah.
And not that I needed to know that, but she wanted to vent a little bit, and she did. And she was very, very upset. And the problems mounted up. Yeah. So clearly we needed to empty this stress bucket. So I said to her, okay, fine, we'll do this. I said, and we went through relaxation, and I practiced hypnotherapy and after 2 sessions, one of which was using hypnotherapy, and hypnotherapy is fantastic, and there's lots of good benefits with that. She never mentioned weight loss again. And after 3 or 4 sessions, she had clearly lost weight, but not one word about it. And it was after about 6 sessions that she, by the way, she said, I've lost, 15 pounds in weight.
Wow. So just over a stone then?
Yeah. And I said, okay, fine. How do you feel about that? Yeah, she said, I've not been trying. So I says, what sparked it? She said, I just feel, I don't know, comfortable with life. And all of a sudden she began to lose weight because she unwittingly, I suppose, to some degree, started making better choices. Clearly she wasn't dipping into the biscuit barrel so much, or whatever her issues were with chocolate or whatever. She was far more relaxed and she made better decisions.
Yep.
And the result was weight loss.
Yep. And then back to what we said earlier, if you feel better in yourself,
absolutely,
feel better mentally, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So the next point then, do you think a person's sex plays a role, on mental health? So obviously being male, female.
As you know, Mark, you can find all sorts of stats on the internet. But I think generally the facts suggest that women are more likely than men to have a common mental health problem. They're certainly almost twice as likely to be diagnosed with anxiety disorders. But one major and alarming area where men really do take a lead, and that's in the cases of suicide. Approximately 75% of all suicides are male.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch upon stereotypes a little bit because obviously, like you've got different terms or like assumptions that like sort of things like women are weak or men need to man up and not necessarily show emotion. And yeah, I remember in school hearing this like all the time. And there's a lovely short poetry book written by a friend of ours called Carl Peach. It's called Man Up, available on Amazon. Quickly plug him. And it's really bloody good. And I think, once again, it's back to like the expectation of how you feel like you need to be perceived and how you react to things can kind of like influence how you see a stereotype.
Absolutely. A lot of men are still living with the traditional expectation of being the breadwinner and to display masculine traits, to be strong. Men of my age were brought up to not cry and show emotions. You seriously would have been outcast from the group. And if you remember earlier, I said our brains had evolved to reward us in developing our pack instincts. So being outcast wouldn't have been a great thing. But I also think that with the onslaught of social media, certainly where young females are concerned, and if you think about, I think it's the ages of 10 to 24, there's a big spike in the increased levels of suicide in females of that age group. You know, and being on social media, we're demonstrating our desire to be accepted. And I think that's a major influence on the mental health of young women today. And you mentioned earlier the stereotypical vision of people in the fitness business. You know, if you didn't look the part, how would you feel?
So touching back on the how people perceive you and stuff like that, and being your own self, right? So I'll always swear by not giving a shit about what anyone thinks of you, right? And I'm very, very big into this because at school, I was always trying to be that person that people liked. In this industry, when I very first got into it, everyone was like a bodybuilder or training to look good, and I felt I had to do that. And yeah, like it's just one of those things where I'm kind of like, when you not like don't give a shit anymore, you do feel very empowered, you feel really good about yourself, that kind of stuff. And so like one of the best things that I swear by is effectively just not giving a shit about what other people think of you. And I think it's so empowering because you do really become yourself. And there was a saying I heard, I can't quite remember from where it is, and I think we've got loads of sayings in this podcast, but you could be the beautifulest, most ripest, tastiest peach in the entire world, but there'll always be that person that just doesn't like peaches.
I like it.
It's really good, isn't it? And it's just kind of like it's one of those things where not everyone's going to like you, not everyone is going to see you in a certain way and kind of understand you. But if you are yourself, you can always go back to, I am my true self and I am my own person.
A lot of people in business try and have a persona that they try and give their clients, which is different to the persona of their normal self.
Yeah.
And they eventually get tripped up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then people start to unravel it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then people's perception of you changes totally.
Yeah.
They don't accept the real you.
Yeah.
They just understand that you've been lying to them.
Yeah.
You know, maybe inadvertently, but this is why it's so important. Don't be who you're not.
Yeah.
Don't try and be.
You're right.
Okay, yeah. And as I say, you know, people get caught out, so.
Yeah, 100%. And another saying, like we're buying things we can't afford to impress the people. Do you know the saying that I'm trying to think of? Yeah, we're buying things that we can't afford to be someone that we're not, to impress people that we don't even like that kind of thing. And it's effectively trying to impress people that like might not even like you as the person you're trying to be, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Once again, another thing that you can do, just be your own self. And a lot of time, like you accepting yourself, who you are mentally, your personality. I know that sometimes I can be a bit much for people, but I thrive on it. But yeah, not everyone likes me, and I'm fully okay with that. It's just one of those things. You're going to get different people with different opinions or preferences and stuff like that. All right, so then moving on to the next point then. So I do want to say, like, this topic is very, what's the word? I don't want to say touchy, but like it really hones deep, and it's something that I'm kind of like really, I don't want to say, but like, yeah, it's something that I do really take seriously. So suicide and self-harm, something so common, something that like I've seen in terms of the self-harm side of things, and suicidal thoughts, something that I personally have lived. And it's not fun, it's not great, but as I say, there are steps that you can kind of do to get you out of that situation and stuff like that. And to some people hearing this, that might be a bit of a shock because, as I said, I don't really talk about it, and I only first spoken publicly about it about 2 years ago. And are you familiar with Movember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So obviously that's to promote mental health with women and stuff like that. And there was a Instagrammer called Ben Kuma, and he's mainly like a nutritionist, kind of online and stuff. And he asked me to do a bit of an article on my experience because I'd mentioned to him about it. And done the article, and at the time I figured it was completely anonymous. So I was like, I'm safe, I'm in my comfort zone, people won't know, won't put this label on me. And then do my thing, scrolling through Instagram. Wait, that's me. That's now public. And obviously from there I was kind of like, oh no, like it's out in the open and that kind of thing. And it was kind of hard for me to kind of like come to terms with it first, but like I had that moment of, okay, so it's out there in the open, what can I do about it? And as we kind of like touched upon earlier about being outside of our comfort zones, and sometimes it's the best thing for us, it's definitely something that I feel is or has been a really good thing, because I've had so many people get in contact with me and kind of go, I've heard the story, and I'll probably put the story in the show notes or the podcast notes. And yeah, like having other people spark a conversation about it, and effectively me be the one that's now listening to them and how they're doing, and like not necessarily offering advice, but also just being that ear to like for people to listen to, all because I shared my story. And I thought it'd be anonymous, but now conversations are starting with people that are also struggling, and all of a sudden they're telling me that they're feeling better because they've got it off their chest and stuff. And although I'm not posting about it on social media and stuff like that, they're then feeling better because they're actually sparking the conversation. And it's why in 2020 I wanted to do more about speaking about it, because in the past, although it wasn't my decision, although it was out of my control, it was the best thing for me because I was able to spark conversations with people from that initial post. Yeah, I feel like I've kind of like gone on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, suicide and self-harm, it definitely rings home. And yeah, obviously we've already touched upon it mainly being male, or like at least like with some of the stats that I sort of...
It's the single biggest killer
yeah.
for men under 45.
Mm-hmm.
Something like 14 a day.
Yeah, that's a lot, yeah. But yeah, like some of the stats that I've sort of read into is in the UK, men are 3 times as likely to die by suicide than women. The highest suicide rate among men is age 45 to 49. And the rate of deaths among under 25s has increased by 23.7%, reaching 730 deaths in 2018 alone. And that's mad for anyone under 25, because everything's with their life, it's just starting, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's horrendous reading, without any shadow of a doubt. And nobody should underestimate it. But, you know, we need to put things into perspective. And, you know, because we don't want to worry people.
Oh, no, 100%. Yeah.
But the numbers are horrendous, without any shadow of a doubt. We need to be doing something about it. And there's a new charity called Calm.
Calm, okay.
And they are very, very good. It's a campaign against living miserably.
Mm-hmm.
And their campaign's pretty hot at the moment. There's a lot of celebs that have started getting on that bandwagon. So people talking about it is highly important. So sharing your story, Mark, will, without any shadow of a doubt, help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the more people can hear it, the more people will open up and talk to it. I've dealt with, I think in the last 12 months, I've probably dealt with 10. I think it's into double figures, people that have had or have tried to commit suicide, not only had suicidal thoughts, but actually attempted suicide.
Yeah.
And I dealt with a very, very severe self-harmer.
Yeah.
And all of them male.
Yeah.
And it's horrendous, and their stories are horrendous. And all of them fully recovered. I know the guy self-harming, he and his young lady have just had a baby.
Oh, that's really good to hear.
So things have really developed for them.
Yeah.
So, you know, seek help again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as much as that is difficult, you can get some help.
And you never know where your life will lead you.
No.
100%. And, like, yeah, you can turn things around. Things don't have to always go how you are in that moment. Like, someone asked me like a question the other day of where do you see your business in 5 years? No idea. This past 5 years alone have been completely different to the 5 years before that and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just in that situation that you're in now, it doesn't always have to be how it is.
You know, they come up with statements like live for the moment. They're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wish your life away and start thinking about what's going to happen in 5 years' time. Just cherish the moments that are happening now.
Yeah, 100%. And there's been so many people where effectively it takes like a near-death experience for them to then fully appreciate life and stuff. And obviously I wouldn't wish that kind of thing on anyone, but like it shouldn't necessarily have to get to a point where you have a near-death experience.
I think one of the most important things I've learned recently, and again I picked it up from somebody I was talking to, and all they said was just ask somebody how they are.
Yeah, 100%.
Just say, how are you? And if they use the word fine, ask them again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ask them again. I support a campaign. It's called the Ask Twice campaign. It's launched by a charity called Time to Change. They've been set up to campaign for an end to mental health discrimination. Becoming actively involved, if you so wish, is easy. Just go onto their website, as I did, and sign up to become a Time to Change champion. Champions use their own experiences of mental health problems to change how we all think and act about mental health. There's plenty of support and plenty of ideas as to what you can do to further this great cause. Maybe there's some scope for you and I to work together and launch some support activities over the coming months, Mark.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll also ask Mark to put a link in the notes of the podcast, just for the URL for the website.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to touch upon, Steve?
No, other than apologies for any coughing you've heard, but I swallowed the wrong bloody way, and it's really uncomfortable. My voice has got rather sexy, I think, with it, so I'm not going to complain too much. But no, I really enjoyed the experience, and as I say, it's great. Thank you very much for asking me.
Yeah, really wanted to have you on.
I hope I've added to it.
Yeah, definitely.
If I'm not, then clearly you won't ask me again.
Yeah, so in the podcast, like typically popular podcasters will call it show notes. But in the show notes or in the notes of the podcast, I'm going to chuck some information of where people can find more about you, Steve. So
absolutely.
Like, where would you
And on
say
my
is best?
website, if anybody wants to, they can give me a call or they can book a telephone call. And it's just a 15-minute telephone conversation that if they've got any questions, if they feel that I can help, if I can't, I can always point them in the direction of people far more knowledgeable than I. But yeah, and it costs nothing. So, you know, if you've got a question, if you've got a concern, give me a call. Book a call online and we'll take it from there.
Cool, lovely. And then if you have any further questions or want to get in touch, you can Google the Mark method. Obviously, if you can't find Steve's information for some reason, I'll be happy to forward you on to him. As I say, in the podcast notes, I'm going to leave links to Steve's website so you can get in contact with him for his support, as well as links to the Charities Mind and the Samaritans if needed. Thank you so much again for listening. Thank you again, Steve. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and take care. See you soon.